go. It's official. Tara, how are you? Oh,
I'm
you
good.
changed
How
you
are
changed your
you?
name.
I changed it back. Did I change it back again?
Yeah, it's not vanilla or chocolate anymore.
Oh yeah, yeah. I went back to Tara.
Can you do me a favor and introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Tara. I live in Queens, New York City. I've been here for, oh my goodness. Well, in Queens for almost a year. I've been in New York though for over a year. I moved in July 2020. I usually talk about being a Chinese adoptee who grew up in the, I should close my window, who grew up in the South, so Maryland, because it is below the Mason-Dixon line. And yes, I like to talk to adoptees, Chinese adoptees more specifically, and record conversations with them as well. And that's usually what I talk about in this podcast, but I am
And that's on
now.
because you have your own podcast,
Yes,
which
yes.
is called.
Adopted Babies from China or ABC podcast.
Oh, that's
Play
clever.
on
ABC.
the play on the American born Chinese because
Right.
we get asked that a lot if we are American born, which is a fair question. I can understand that. But I think as adoption becomes more of a common conversation or it's becoming more apparent in what we see in like media and television, um, that is not the first question people ask anymore. It's usually are you American, but then it's also like, oh, are you adopted? So that's always like a fun trend to see happening these days.
How can I ask this? Do people ask if you're American born? Why? Is it more of a, hey, are you more culturally American or are you more culturally Chinese, or what is like the reason for that type of question?
I think people usually ask that as more of, are you more culturally American? Because
Mm,
there's like an expectation that you should speak the language usually. And so it's like if you're an American, it's oh, okay, that's understandable that you are speaking English versus, or that you can't understand, or you don't, or you're choosing not to speak. But I can't speak for all of us because I think there's a difference between like being an adoptee. There's a lot of similarities, but there's a difference in being a Chinese adoptee versus actually being like an American born Chinese or culturally being raised in America, but having a Chinese family still, of course, like parents.
right. And it also depends on the age, right? Because I mean, I assume that not every single adopted person is adopted at, 10 days old, right?
Right. Yeah, I think that does have a huge play into it. I was adopted at 4 years old, almost five, when I came here to the US. And a lot of adoptees I speak with usually are about just over a year old. I think the oldest person I might have spoken with who came to the US via adoption might have been actually like five or six. But it's not as common as hearing about adoptees who are just like a year old or just under.
Right. And you said that there's more and more adoptions occurring today.
I think ever since they lifted the one child policy or two child, I guess there's no policy now, but it may not be as, it's probably still happening, but I don't think it's nearly as much as high as it was back in like 1990s when
Mm.
I was adopted at that time. Yeah.
Do you know anything about your background then? Or did you get adopted and you just kind of stuck with your American family?
Ooh, so for a very long time, I sort of stuck with the American family and didn't have a lot of curiosity to learn more about my adoption
Mm-hmm.
until about 3 years ago. I've always known or been aware of course, that I'm adopted because I do not look like my family. That's no surprise there. And when it was just one of those like, oh, I'm 25. Let's go ahead and venture more into this curiosity about being adopted. So I
Right.
think that was at the point of like one of those early identity moments that I had. Well, I had other identity moments when I was younger, but at the age of 25, that's when I felt more comfortable and confident to actually do something about it. So that's when I went back to China in the city that I was adopted from, or yeah, the city I was adopted from, and went back to the Social Welfare Institute. I mean, it's orphanage, but in China, that's what they call them is social welfare institutes.
Hmm.
I went back there, had a little tour, which was sort of interesting. I think every adoptee has it's an experience, I'm sure, and it varies depending on where you're from or what town you come from. Mine was, I think there's a lot of staging involved, but it would be naive to think that was not going to be the case. And I was definitely a little bit naive about that.
Staging, as
Uh,
in they made it seem like the institution is like top notch, perfectly like ran perfectly, or what do you mean by that?
yes, yes, a little bit of that. And then also when I went there and the tour, I didn't see any girls. I only saw boys, but I'm pretty
Hmm.
confident there definitely are boys there too. And this was just the institute that I'm from. I think I've
Right,
heard
right.
it's different everywhere, but or maybe that is in other places. I'm sure they do that too. But at my institute where I'm from, it was pretty clear. At the time, though, I was overwhelmed and sort of just trying to see because I went there with the hope, trying not to have any intention or hope of, oh, I'm going to have some answers. But deep down, I definitely was hoping for something that was not going to happen. Meaning, I kind of was hoping maybe some memories would resurface just being in that environment. Of course, the brain is a powerful tool, and I think my brain has blocked out a lot of those memories, probably for a good reason.
Right. So
That is the question.
how did it
Oh
make you
yeah.
feel then going in there?
At the time, it's sort of just surreal, and I was like, "Oh, well, I'm glad I did this. I think this was something I needed to do." And I'm more happy about the results after that visit. That was sort of the catalyst or the start to really dive more into learning about adoption and connecting with others. And then also sort of learning more about my own identity too, because let's see, 25, I was working at jobs down in the DMV area that all were not satisfactory or I didn't enjoy them. I wasn't very happy in them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when you want to, sometimes I think when we want to get answers or learn something else about ourselves, we might dig deep into like our roots, possibly. And that's what I was doing with that trip. So I think that was definitely helpful in that way of going on that trip to sort of learn more about myself and what I want to do. I definitely hadn't run a marathon yet. No, not back then. That wasn't until 2019.
So when you did go to China though, did you feel and maybe it wouldn't matter, but did you feel thankful that you got adopted and didn't grow up there, or did you feel like you missed out on anything like that?
Haha. I would say yes, a big part of me was relieved I wasn't brought up there more than the feeling of like I missed out on something. And I say that because presently I have a lot more of my own free will. And I don't think there's a lot of that in China for, I guess, anybody who lives there. So taking the adoption part out of it, I think there's a lot with, well, there's a lot in America too that's kind of twisted, but especially in China, or what I understand, we don't have as much free will there as we do in the US for the most part.
Right. Yeah, I was just curious about that because I've had plenty of people on the podcast who were either born in the U.S. from immigrants or who moved here when they were young, and then some a little not as young, and everyone kind of has like a different response to how they identify, how they feel about certain things. I know some people that were born here to immigrant parents who just never fit at home entirely because they grew up as quote unquote an
Mm-hmm.
American. And so they just kind of had that conflict, right? And then there's others that, yeah, at first they really leaned into their heritage and their origins, where they were born, but then over the years they just kind of adopted this American lifestyle. And then others that, came a little bit older and they still feel rooted back where they were born and grew up a little bit. It's a weird
Mm.
dynamic of how people identify themselves.
Yes, I agree. I think there's always like a couple there's extremes of some people who connect with something about the root of their origins, and then others who completely distance themselves from it. And as we age, I think that varies. Sometimes that will shift. And I guess presently, I'm definitely more leaning towards the connecting to the culture that I wasn't born into, but I know that's somewhat part of my origins. And it could be very well because I was 4 years old that maybe that I do have a little bit more of a connection to it because I did speak the language and I lived in that environment at least up until age 4, whereas a lot of adoptees who come to the US just over a year old or under a year old, their core early years are in the American culture too. Of course, adoptees go to other areas in Europe too. I only know the American experience being being an American myself.
Right,
Uh,
right.
so it's tough, and I don't know. I appreciate the cultural aspects of Chinese culture for sure. And then something I've realized recently too, because I have two older brothers who are, as we always say, like they're biological sons to my parents. So it's like I have two older brothers who are white, and then me. So growing up, even in that dynamic has its own intricacies. Where I mean, I'll be honest, that's why I like to talk about with other adoptees if they have siblings or that are adopted or not adopted with them. And just, I think as humans, we always connect with people who have the same similar dynamics, whether they be positive or negative, which is why it's cool your podcast is called This Is Human.
We're
And
all in this together, one way or another.
we're all in this together. And it's only recently, of course, and just talking to a lot of people where I realize it's like, just because you're I think in a way, like being adopted, we can have this fallback, quote unquote. I won't say it is a reason, it's a valid reason, but it was like, oh, well, I'm not, my parents aren't my birth parents. So they had a decision or they had a choice in adopting. And to an extent, they definitely do have a choice in the adoption process. But when people have their own children, they don't necessarily get to choose how their children turn out to be as they get older. We as adoptees just get to be like, oh, well, my trait that you may not like is not from you guys, it's from my birth parents. Ha ha. So I think that was that was a little bit of insight that I think allows me to be a lot more sympathetic these days than I used to be. Because I mean, we all have different feelings about it too, of course. So I can't speak for the adoption conversation in general because I'm not too active in that community, in that conversation. I can only speak from again my own personal insight, but it's like, oh yeah, well, my parents didn't exactly get to choose how my two brothers turn out to be and the decisions they make. But I guess they could say they had more influence in how I turned out, just because it was a decision to adopt. But that's
Well,
always a fun
yeah.
conversation.
I mean, to a certain extent, right? Do you know about Ernie Johnson's? He's a NBA, I guess, host, commentator. Um, his son recently passed away. I think at the age of 35. He had some. It's like a disease where just moving his muscles was a lot of work. His speech wasn't all there. But when he adopted his son, it was from, I think, either a Russian or Eastern European country, and they were like, "Oh, you don't want this baby because this baby's broken."
Mm.
And he was like, and they were like, "Yo, we're taking this baby, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
there is no such thing as a broken baby, right?"
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, to a certain extent, you don't always, even if you adopt. I mean, I pray that the people adopting aren't going in there looking for the perfect baby, right? They're
Right.
going in there saying, "Hey, who can we help, and who can we give a life that maybe they won't be able to get anywhere else, right?" But I don't know.
Yeah. I think that's always a question. I mean, because it can to go a little bit dark, but there are humans in this world who I think sometimes exist to cause suffering, sadly. Like murder and lovely things like that. Of course, I say that as trying not to be so deep and serious, but at the same time, it's true. Like this stuff happens.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
I mean, there definitely was a recent case where I think it was like a YouTube influencer or something did adopt a baby from China who was a male. It was like a little boy, and he ended up having, I forget exactly what it was, but I think he ended up having a disability, a mental disability, and like returned the child. And that was a huge, huge outcry and disappointment for like you adopted this child and you decide you don't want him because he has a mental disability. And I was like, damn, people are messed up. Like you're not doing it for the right reason.
Yeah, and I mean, even that also happens to biological, parents and children, right? Where once the kid
Yeah,
starts to grow up a little bit and they see that it's not quote unquote your normal healthy kid, then they just abandon the kid, and
yeah.
there's nothing. No, yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot of ugly stuff out there, and there are a lot of people that are doing things for the wrong reasons and all that good stuff. But I do believe that a vast majority of people are doing things for the right reasons
Mm-hmm.
or with minimal intentions of greed or minimal intentions of, I don't know, satisfying themselves or whatever. Like I had a friend joking around, like he was like, "Man, I want to go help people in Haiti, and I'm gonna go there and volunteer, and I'm gonna feel so good about it." And I'm like, and then we started debating, like, well, are you doing it for the right reasons? I mean, we were all just kind of joking around, but that is a conversation
Yeah.
about why do people do certain things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even if it looks good, is there a good intention behind it, or is it greed or selfishness behind it?
Oh yeah. That's always a interesting conversation to have with people, and I think you learn a lot about another person based on that conversation too, of like altruism. It's like, are you doing it for the right reason or does it just make you feel better?
Mm-hmm.
But making you feel better and you're doing it, so are you really doing it for other people or are you just doing it for yourself? And it's like, I guess it's both usually, but
Yeah, I'm not really a Bible person, but I do. There is a verse in there, and I wish I could remember exactly where it is, but it just basically talks about in the moment of doing good, don't let the left hand know what the right hand is doing. And basically, what that is interpreted as is when you do good, you shouldn't boast about it. You shouldn't tell people about it. You should just do it and just keep it within
mm,
yourself. Right.
mm,
So whenever I do see people like bragging, like, "Oh, look at me, I did this or I did that," and it's like, okay, like, good job, I guess, but also you're not, I don't know, not being humble about it. Like,
mm,
I, I it's not like I volunteer a lot, at least not anymore. But even when I did, and when I do try and chip in and do good, I don't tell anybody because it's like, all right, I'm not doing it for attention. I'm not doing it for any other reason other than I genuinely just want to do better for people around me, you know?
yeah. Yeah, I don't remember anything about. I remember going to Sunday school as a kid because, Catholic upraising, all that fun stuff. I feel like most people I talk to were like, yeah, I was raised Catholic, but of course I don't, or now I don't follow the practices or anything that I learn. I don't know why that's a very common theme I hear when I speak with others, but I guess there is some philosophy within that written word.
Yeah, I mean, everything is, look, we're all human, and everything is what we interpret it to be.
Yeah.
And man, you can find some really dark stuff that people take out of the Bible and some really good stuff. And then some people just take
Mm-hmm.
it for what it is. And then some people look for anything inspirational. Look, it's up to you. It's not none of my business how you look at the world. Um, but I do genuinely think that if someone can do good, they should do good. And I genuinely believe that most people do good.
Mm-hmm.
Most.
Most. Yes. Most.
Definitely not all.
Oh
But
yeah.
uh, let's change the subject a little bit to a little bit more happy. Congratulations on the marathon.
Oh yeah. You know what they don't tell you about marathon? I think post-marathon.
What is it?
It's like the emotional fall sometimes because it's such a big accomplishment that sometimes like the after effect, you're like, what do I do now that I've accomplished this big goal? So they don't always
Really?
talk about this part. Yeah, it's actually funny. Well, not exactly funny, but I was experiencing that today. So this was actually my second marathon. My first marathon was in 2019. It was also in New York City.
Oh, so you've ran New
And
York City twice now.
I've now ran New York City twice. The first time was through the general lottery, and this time was through a local running group in Queens that I got in through the group, one of the slots.
Nice.
But this one I actually PR'd, so that's always like pretty exciting when you get a PR. Not gonna, can't say I'm not proud of that.
What is PR? Personal record?
Yes, when you beat your time.
Well, what may I know? May I ask what was your time?
My time in 2019 was 6 hours and 3 minutes, and this year I finished in 5 hours and 55. So I did a sub
Nice.
six, which big accomplishment because I was like, I am a distance runner, but you hear, I mean, there's people that I hear. This is another thing. It's like you can't compare yourself to everybody else. But again, it's tough not to do that sometimes. But it's like I know a lot of people who can run the marathon in like 3 hours or just under 4 hours. It's like, how do you do this?
Well,
You run really fast.
I think to like qualify for the Boston, you have to run it under 3 hours or something like that,
Yes. Oh,
which is
yeah.
just mind-boggling.
Yeah. I mean, you're basically sprinting the whole thing. And 26 miles is well, 26.2 miles is a long sprint.
I'll sprint for half a mile and I'll be dead.
Right. Yeah. I think it's like, it's one of those things that it was a huge accomplishment. Of course, it was like a huge accomplishment. I trained really hard for it, and PR was a great deal. And it's like a big high too, because even like during the run, you think, why am I doing this? Because it's hard, it is painful.
I
And
mean, it's
then
torture, right?
a little bit. I mean, you ran a marathon too, right? You've done a couple?
Yeah, I've run a couple of them. But yeah, I mean, technically, the human body is not designed to do that.
Supposedly, right? And
And
then,
I've
yeah, we
read
did.
articles that literally say that your kidneys start to shut down a little bit, your organs start to shut down a little bit after like 3 hours or something like that, after like 2 hours. And it's like,
Oof.
why are people doing this?
Like, why? Yeah, why do we voluntarily decide to endure pain for so long? Who knows?
But I mean, you're right. It is like an adrenaline rush.
Yeah, I think that's it too. And your body is tired from all the training too. And you finally do because you're not supposed to run the 26 miles before. Usually, I mean, it depends how experienced some people are,
Right.
but your body's tired. So I was like, I felt it, of course, the day after. And then today, I felt like this like emotional change from like, oh, it's really good you did this thing to like, oh my God, what do I do? I've been like holding off these thoughts about life, what I should be doing next, and had like I mean, it wasn't a panic attack, but like a mini meltdown where I just was like, yeah,
So
I don't know
I'll
what I'm doing.
we're not leaving the marathon topic, but I know kind of what you feel, and I think that this is why I go from like one hobby to the next, just because
Mm,
I I need a constant quote unquote challenge or feel like I'm conquering something.
ah,
So like right now I'm doing rock climbing and bouldering, and that's a lot of fun. But I can already tell that by the time spring hits, I'm gonna be doing something else.
Ah.
But yeah, and I had just got done doing like archery. I'm also starting to get into like soccer a little bit. Just pursuing a new challenge. And I don't need to become like the world's greatest of anything, right? But I just want to know that I can
Mm-hmm.
comfortably do something and that I become a little bit more knowledgeable about it.
Oh, do you ever cycle back to previous things you were interested in?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've taken a a decent break from doing stand up. Um,
Mm.
but I'm definitely gonna get back into that because I do miss that adrenaline rush of going up there, making an ass of yourself, but then like hearing the claps, right?
Yeah.
Um, that in itself is a rush too. So, but yeah, I mean, I also want to go back into archery a little bit because that was legitimately fun. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so it's yeah, I mean, you just become I don't know I do understand the feeling of man, what's next, right? What can I like do to like I don't know
Mm-hmm.
feel that feeling of completing something
Mm-hmm.
or overcoming something. And actually, that's why after seeing all the people cheering for the marathon, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go and sign up for another one. And so
Ooh,
I have applied for the lottery for both London and Berlin.
nice.
But yeah, I was jealous that everybody out there was running and they're gonna feel so good at the end of the race. I want that. I want that again.
You're like the FOMO, right? I guess it's FOMO.
Yeah, but I mean the three. Like, how long did you train for the marathon?
4 months?
Yeah, see, that's what I don't miss. The 4 months before the
Yeah.
marathon.
Oh yeah. I mean it's definitely a commitment. However, it's a lot easier when you find a community, that's for sure, or you find people you can train with. And
Mm,
I think that's a large part of why I think this experience because when I did in 2019, I did train with a group down in Maryland, DC area. But all of us, most of us were training for the Marine Corps. And then it was this whole thing of like, well, I'm not doing Marine Corps, I'm doing New York City. So I'm not going to see anybody that I trained with
mm.
versus this year training with a bunch of people, most of them who were running New York City. It was like, oh, I'll see you at the start line or the village and it won't be so lonely. But it was lonely before. I was like, it's kind of lonely to do this before when you don't have people to enjoy that experience with, especially in the beginning. So I don't know if that made it a lot more pleasant for sure. And then the cheering too. The group that I was training with, they were all. I mean, we're in Queens, so like right after you get off the Pulaski Bridge, the group was there cheering,
Mm-hmm.
not training. I was like, well, that feels really nice. And as a result of training, I became pretty involved and I started to do a little bit of like leading as far as some of the runs. So
Mm.
overall, I was like, this is a good experience. Could just be that's my style. When you show up to something, you become reliable, and that's always a nice feeling. It's like, oh,
Right. And
this person's reliable.
it sounds like you build a little community as well, right? Like
Yes.
it's not just about hey, I'm gonna go run, let's all train together. No, you become friends and get to know each other and literally root
Yeah.
for each other.
Yeah. And then I'll do it again, I'm sure, because I enjoy it.
You enjoy that torture of letting your organs slowly die.
Oh yeah. I mean, aren't we all technically dying slowly day by day?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is why I just kind of go out and I do whatever I want. I'm just like, look, I'm still young. My body can handle it. I'll do whatever the fuck I want.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I'm 65, 75, 85, I'll be, I don't know, asking people to change my diaper and I'll be like, damn, I can't do anything anymore.
Hey, but at least you'll be like, hey, at least I tried all those hobbies and here I am.
No, yeah, for sure. But yeah, what was it? What was the most challenging part of training for it for you?
Oh man. I think it's a little bit, I mean, it's good to be with people too, but when you're at the very back, so that's a fun thing. It's like I call myself a BOP, which is back of the pack. And that's what the term we coined ourselves in the training I did in 2019, the BOPs. Sometimes that can be a little bit intimidating that like everybody's done or they're so far ahead
Mm,
of you and you're like trying to catch up. And again, everybody runs their own race, everybody does their own pace, so nobody should
right.
feel like you can't do that. But there is a little bit of like a it took me probably, I don't know, a month to get over this idea of I'm keeping everybody from running the pace they need to run, or I'm not doing this or that. But you know what? It doesn't really matter. That's like your own battle you have. But there were some times where that was hard to not think about, oh my gosh, if only I ran a little bit faster, or if I could pick up the pace, I wouldn't be
Right.
so far back here. But at the same time, I had to think about it. It's like, well, you are showing up, and that's more than half the battle. So I think the hardest thing sometimes is like beating yourself up or giving yourself a hard time when it's honestly, it's like you're doing a lot more than you give yourself credit for. And that's something in training that I had trouble with sometimes.
But it's also like important that you know your body, you know your limits, you know what you're comfortable with,
Yes.
right? So, um, I I think you handled it. I mean, obviously great. I mean, you beat your personal best time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I understand that. Actually, when I trained or when I do go running in Central Park, I usually go against the grain because I don't want people
Mm.
running next to me because it bothers me when people pass me, and then I also feel bad when I go past people.
Mm.
So
So
I
it's so funny
always
though.
go against the grain so that there are almost nobody's running with me.
That's smart. That is actually pretty funny, but also pretty smart. It's like that. I was wondering why people sometimes go the opposite way because it's like one way, quote unquote, especially for well, cyclists, yes, but
Right, right.
runners,
Tend
yeah, I
to
never really thought
go
about.
counterclockwise,
Yeah.
I believe,
Mm-hmm.
and then I go clockwise.
Well, I was telling people about the experience of because I think it's like you're pacing off of somebody. So of course, training you can pace off people, but during the race itself, there was towards the end in Central Park, somebody was pacing off of me, and I had to double check. It's like I don't, maybe they're not pacing off of me. I don't know because the world doesn't revolve around you, Tara. I don't think everything's about you. It's one of those moments. But
Yeah.
then I actively, because it's a pretty wide course, I actively would went to the other opposite side of the well, I mean, say it's like 12 feet wide, right? So we're in the middle. I went to the far right. So that's almost a whole, I don't know why I chose such a 12 feet. What is that, 3 yards?
Yeah.
Math. It's much wider than that. Essentially,
Or
but
4 yards.
think of a yeah, I think it's like a wide distance, right? And we're in the middle. I went all the way to the other side, but then this person I saw came to the same side as me. And I was like, you had to actively, it's like you're actively obviously watching me because you're pacing off of me. Because in the beginning, it was like, is this person pacing off of me? And what I mean by that is like I'm running my consistent pace because I'm known for that. I'm running my consistent pace. And then this person was walking. And then when they saw me, they start running. And then they stop running a little bit and I keep running, right?
Yeah.
And then they start walking. So because somebody was like, what does that even mean? It's like it means that when they see me, they start running and they basically want to keep being ahead of you. But then I like
Mm.
went all the way to the right side to see if like maybe this person will stop doing that and stop looking out for me and just do their own thing. Nope, that person came all the way to the right, and I'm like, you
That's
stink.
amazing.
It's like
They put that much effort.
why? Oh my gosh,
I mean,
it's like
yeah.
it's. I mean, I understand how it probably helps that person, but it's also sort of like come on, bro. We're all running our own race. Can you not do that? Make me feel like I'm slow by doing your thing here. However, I did lose this person eventually because I kept running my consistent pace. My goal was like, all right, let's just run the last 3 miles, which is all in Central Park has some hills. And
Yeah.
then the person like couldn't at some point the person I didn't see the person anymore. They couldn't keep up. Or maybe it was just dark. I don't know. But I think that's one of those things where it's like, I want to be a part of this community and help you, but it's also just like, please don't do that. Like we're all just, you know.
It's so funny that even though it's so much physical work and so like physical to like run a marathon, it's also so psychological
Oh yeah.
of just convincing yourself of what you're doing, looking for any sort of like edge to help you like maintain your body from shutting down. Like, yeah, I mean, yeah, it does sound. I completely get it, right? If someone was doing that to me, I'd be like, yo, fuck off.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's
Exactly.
like, man, I can definitely see myself looking at someone and be like, all right, come on, let me try and keep up with that person, right? Just anything to like help me accomplish my goal of finishing this stupid race.
Yeah. I was like, oh. I mean, it was definitely at mile like 22. It's like, why do we do this to ourselves again? Like, why was I doing this? Uh but then you cross that finish line and you're like, oh, that's why we do this.
It's amazing. It's amazing feeling.
It's amazing. And then I did think about like, why did you start running back in like 2015? Yeah, I think that's when I started. And that helps to give some perspective.
Why did you start running?
I started running because I believe because I was not very much active growing up. And then I was still at home living with my parents, and that's a whole other conversation with family, of course. And I was like, I need something to do for my own sanity. I don't really want to follow anybody's schedule, so I started running. And at the time, it's like I didn't know anything about what you're supposed to do, so I wore the wrong types of clothing, and I also did not have the right shoes, which is important as I learned. Um, but I think it was a little bit of like stress too. And I found, oh, this feels really good with stress. How I started running a marathon though, or training for a marathon, was I got an email. It was like, hey, enter the lottery for New York City Marathon. I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. And at the time, I didn't know that it can be very difficult to get into that lottery.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got in. So I was one of those people who went from only running a 10K maybe at the most to training for a marathon. I'm like, I feel like this is my personality to go big with things. It's like, if you're going to do it, you got to go big
Go big or go
and
home.
go big. Yeah. Oh, and I definitely have done many go big, go home moments where I actually end up going home because it was not worth the big jump.
Right, that's funny.
um,
Go big or go home. Well, I'm going home. I'll see
and
you
I went
later.
home sometimes. It's like, no,
That's awesome.
we we didn't need to go home, or we didn't need to go big on that one, so I went home. And that's like a really long way to go back with. I think post marathon, of course, your body usually needs to recover if there's some people who are very elite and can run the day after, which is amazing. But there's also the emotional aspect too. You work so hard and trained and spent maybe 4 months or more or less on such a big activity. So there are things that I definitely was not thinking about and knew in the back of my mind that eventually I had to address. It was like stuff with work, stuff with family. And all of a sudden it just sort of like flooded to me today after like a meeting I had for a gig that I do for another podcast, actually. It was just like a meeting we had about updates. And I was like, this is what's going on. And I was feeling so overwhelmed. And I was like, am I doing this right? And I panicked a little bit and felt overwhelmed. And I had to sit down. And I was like, this has to be because you've you've had something that you've been working on, you finally accomplished it, and now all these idle thoughts, well, not idle, but these thoughts that you've known you need to address are now you have room because I don't need to wake up or I don't need to go to a run after work today. I don't need to go to a run after work at all this week because that's might be too much. But I think that's one of those things that people don't always talk about is after you finish, what do you do? How do you like ease back into that situation where it's like, oh, I don't have to train anymore? Because my personal experience after 2019, I ran, and then all the COVID stuff started happening. So
Mm.
it's kind of like I didn't have this big situation or big emotional push that I've been experiencing this year because COVID. I mean, the first case unofficially reported, I think, was around like November, December. I actually got really sick. That's what the other thing was. In 2019, after the marathon, I think maybe 2 weeks later, I had gotten really sick and couldn't go to work. And then I ended up getting fired. So it's just kind of like,
Damn.
okay, yeah. And then this year, I mean, who knows what's happening? There's definitely confusing things that are unclear that are happening with work, but I've been having thoughts about what am I going to do for a while. COVID is, I don't know, a blessing and a, what is that? What's that term I'm looking for? It's like the saying.
A blessing and a curse.
Yes, that one. It's one of those. It's like, okay, COVID.
Well, I think you should and obviously this is advice from someone that knows nothing about anything. But I do share some of those feelings that you have, and honestly, like something that, again, what I do in my world is I look for little challenges and I focus on those, and that's what kind of helps me, I guess, face reality, I guess would be the term. Because yeah, I mean, not every day can be the best day ever, and not every day you're going to go out and have fun, and not every day you're going to finish a marathon and get that euphoric feeling, and not every day I'm going to go out there and crush a stand-up gig or something like that. That's just not realistic. The reality is I have a job, I have a body that needs to be taken care of, I need to feed myself, I have family I got to take care of, I got friends to help, a lot of responsibilities, and that's just kind of what real life is, right? You just kind of have to accept it, and it's like, okay, cool, but if I am going to do all that, I might as well have fun with it and do new things that kind of take my mind off of it and make sure that everything that I'm doing is worth it. And I count my blessings because I am beyond lucky. I have some of the best friends that anyone could ever ask for. We have so many traditions where literally every couple months I have something to look forward to. We literally do from like New Year's to like Super Bowl together to like half New Year's to the bridge run in Charleston to draft party to the holidays, and then on top of that we visit each other all the time, and it's like I have that constant thing to look forward to.
Right.
So I'm beyond blessed by that. But yeah, definitely having those little hobbies and picking up new challenges is something that helps me at least get through some of those, like, all right, cool, I just did something really, really cool. Now what?
Right.
But
Yeah, I think, and the other insight I was given today by a friend was saying, it's like, I mean, the only person that you have to answer to is yourself. So the external things that you're feeling or you feel like you have to answer to, that's not true. It's like it's only you that you have to deal with your own decisions, which is funny because I tell that to people all the time. But I think when you're in that heated moment and you're emotional, you just lose some rational thinking. It's like, that's what I tell people all the time. But hearing it says to
absolutely.
you, you're just like, oh, that's right. Yeah.
That's usually how it goes too, with like
Oh, yeah.
like whenever anybody gives anybody else advice, you're so good at giving it, but then when you like reflect on what you're doing and what your decisions are, and it's like, am I really listening to myself here? Like what am I doing here?
Emotion's a very powerful tool that just sometimes clouds all rationality at times.
Oh,
Which,
absolutely. Absolutely. No, I try. I mean, this might sound really weird, but I try not to get emotional about anything, which is why probably my ex hated me. But yeah, I try my best to keep emotions out of like everything, just because then you can make a better decision. But hey, we're all human. We all get emotional. We all make dumb decisions based off of whatever, right?
oh, yeah.
Like I actually got pickpocketed watching the marathon on Sunday.
Oh, lovely.
And I was pretty emotional about it for like the first 24 hours in terms of, man, that wallet meant so much to me. Like the wallet itself. Everything else, I don't give a shit. Like I'll buy another
Mm-hmm.
whatever, right? Um, but the wallet itself was like, damn. Like that wallet was perfect. I've had it for 8 years. It is like literally just perfect. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I was very emotional about it. But then after like 24 hours, I was like, you know what? It's just a
Yeah,
wallet.
I know,
It's a
but it's
little piece of
so.
leather that doesn't mean anything, right? Like when I go from this earth, someone's going to look at it and be like, oh, it's just a wallet. If it's probably going to end
Mhm.
up in the trash somewhere, right? Like who cares? It's like, all right, I'm over it. And then sure enough, 24 hours after that, I get a phone call and someone found it.
Oh,
After someone tried to use my credit cards, I guess they just tossed it,
oh,
and someone found it and I got it back. And now I'm like, huh. Now I'm looking at this wallet like, maybe you're not as important as I thought, but I'm still happy I have you.
yeah.
Damn emotions.
I know, and it's one. Sometimes it's like the thought of like, is this gonna matter to you in 2 days, or
Right.
in 24 hours, in 2 days, in a week, in a month, in a year?
Right.
Gosh darn. I mean, like as a teenager, everything seems like it's the end of the world in those years.
Oh
But
my God. Yeah.
there's so many things now. It's like I don't even remember. I think it's also brain is a powerful tool, especially I've been thinking about this more recently too, with like because people always ask like, do you remember anything from when you were before 4? And I was like, no. I think that's probably my brain just blocking that out for a good reason, I would imagine. But even presently, I think like there's a lot of stuff I don't remember from high school or college. Occasionally, sometimes things will come back, memories will return, but people, I don't always recognize people. And
Mm.
I think with social media too, I've always had a tendency to only want to connect to people that I know or remember, I want to say. So
Mm.
there are people who pop up. I mean, because Facebook does this where people will pop up of like people you may know. And I
Mm.
see a name
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, oh, I forgot that person, I guess, went to the same college or same high school. Obviously, I have nothing or no information I'd like to share with this person because I'm not friends with them. But it is when you see a name, it comes back of that memory of like, oh, that's how I knew that person. I think maybe not, but it's always interesting to think about how your brain just sometimes will block out things because it's not important as you once thought it was.
Yeah. The brain is definitely a very weird thing. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's designed to try and keep you alive, right? So
Right.
I've read or heard so many times about how bad instances that were detrimental to you, your brain will be more than happy to kind of like forget about that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but if there is something that you really enjoyed or something that you really, you know, shot all of these adrenaline and all sort of stuff, you're more likely to remember that, right?
Right.
Um, but yeah, I mean, who knows? All I know is you gotta try and live day by day, be thankful for what you have,
Oh yeah.
appreciate and don't take things for granted, right? It's
Yeah.
acknowledge where you are in the universe and what it means and go from there.
That sounds like a PSA for it. Don't be on social media so much, world, as
Yeah,
well. Because,
yeah. I mean that stuff is just poison.
yeah, straight poison. How
Yeah,
we survive.
I mean we kind. Look, I talked to I'm gonna sound really old here, but I was talking to some low 20s kids, like 22, 23, and just their mindset and the way they talked and everything that they did and how they expressed themselves and how they viewed the world was just so different from what I'm used to. And I'm like, damn, like that just made me officially feel like an old man.
Mm,
But I guarantee you that a lot of it comes from like social media and, like, oh, well, the internet knows best, right? So if one person on Instagram or Facebook or whatever says, "Oh, shame on this person because they're not, I don't know, ideologically correct," and then they're like, "Oh, you know what? If that person said it, then it must be true, right?" And so they all of a sudden have these like opinions and like, I don't know, things that are shaped by someone online who may not even be telling the truth.
And it's also probably our parents' generation and older. They probably feel the same way that we do now with, I
Oh
guess, is
yeah.
it is there another one after Gen Z now that are coming that have a,
I'm sure the kids that are being born right now, but or around there, but
yeah.
yeah, because I'm I'm a millennial, and then the Gen Zers that I was talking to were like, "Oh my god, what the fuck is this?"
Cycle of life.
Yeah, but no, yeah, so social media is evil, and it's a tool to be used, and not too many people realize that it's a tool. People see it as actual life,
Oh, I see.
so it's dangerous.
It's dangerous. I think this first podcast I haven't really gone too much into like, well, we talked a little bit about adoption, but it seems like we're conversing about other things too, which is a first for me, I want to say. How long have you been doing this show for?
I think right around a year. Um,
Ah,
yeah, I mean, look, I love doing this. I love talking to people, getting new perspective, new experiences, because I wish I could live a million times and experience it all, but I can't. At least not that I know
mm,
of. So why not just talk to people and explore the world that way?
oh yeah. Passing the year mark is always, it's like bittersweet. You're like, I've been doing this for a year? Shit.
Look, I already feel old. Please don't add to it. Um,
I was gonna say I mean, ABC podcast has been around for over a year now too. And I was like, damn. I
and
also,
but you enjoy it, right?
I do enjoy it. I definitely do enjoy it. I mean, to be fair, I think that's also one of the only consistent things I had for a good year.
Mm,
Everything else was kind of
hectic.
insane. Yes, hectic.
Well, I'm sure nothing but good things are heading your way, and then
I
you'll
would hope so.
you'll be able to fight off those post marathon blues.
Yeah, post marathon blues.
See, I'm telling you, so I've done 3 marathons, and all 3 of them I've traveled for. So I think that really helped me out, because right after the marathon, it's like, all right, let's go get hammered and do stupid stuff.
Mm,
And so there was like, for me, just because I was traveling, there was no like, oh man. It was more like, oh fuck yeah, I finished. Now let's go party. I'm allowed to party as hard as I want to now.
mm-hmm.
So yeah, I guess if you did do it in your hometown or where you live, after that, it's like, well, now what?
Right. Yeah, I guess. So you've never done New York City?
No, I've entered it once or twice and I didn't get it. Um, so now I'm thinking that because I live here, it might be like the last one I do, or not the last one I do, but what is it, like 6 main?
The
Um,
Six Worlds?
yeah, I want to do the 6 of them.
Okay, that's a good goal.
So now it's like, all right, I'll try and save New York for last, but we'll see.
So have you done the three that you've done are world ones?
2 of them were. One of them, a friend of mine dragged me into it, and I hate her for it because I did not want to do it. I don't enjoy training for a marathon, but because she was like, "Oh, you don't love me if you don't do it," and it's like, fine. I did San Francisco. That's the one that was not a world.
Mm,
Again, I was traveling. As soon as it was over, explored San Francisco, flew to LA to visit a friend, family, went back to San Francisco, partied it up. Um, and then, yeah, and then actually, the whole like cheering thing, that reminds me. For that marathon, my ex-girlfriend and my parents went to it. And
mm-hmm.
I don't know how they did it. It was a miracle. I don't know how the fuck they did it, but I saw them like 5 times throughout the marathon.
Oh, that's impressive.
And I was like, what the fuck? I was like, how are you guys here again? And like my mom literally thought was like, oh man, like should we stop doing that? Because they sounded like he was mad. And my dad's like, fuck no, let's go to the next station. And so I saw them again and again and again. And I was like more impressed with them than with what I had just done, right? I'm like, look, yeah, I just ran, but that was boring. How the hell did you guys get around everywhere? Like that was impressive.
In San Francisco too, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to think of their transportation system.
I think they just Ubered everywhere. I don't know how.
Um,
Because half of the roads are closed, right?
right. Okay, so that is pretty impressive.
Yeah, so I'm like, man, what the fuck are they doing? Like, like super impressive. But no, it was actually awesome to like have that boost of energy, like just knowing that they're there cheering for you. So yeah, it's cool that you have that little community also that kind of was there for you.
Definitely. Definitely. Makes a world of difference.
No, absolutely. No, yeah, it's humans are not designed to be lone creatures.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime you can have a good circle, and they take care of you and you take care of them, right?
Right.
Anyways, one last thing. I was gonna challenge you on being Southern because I don't know if Maryland counts.
You're from North Carolina, right?
Kentucky and North Carolina.
Oh gosh, yeah.
That's
Not even a
Southern.
challenge. That's not a challenge. I just make that joke because I mean, sue me, but it's just funny because it's like I mean, we're below the Mason-Dixon line, so technically we are,
Technically.
but I'm pretty sure Maryland was like one of the first states to was it appropriate the Northern customs at the time. So it's a joke because I even like as a kid, I was like, oh, we're below the Mason-Dixon line, really? Because we don't have all that charm that, of course, below Maryland, like Virginia, Virginia's Southern. That's like, yeah, we don't have any of that. A lot of the Confederate history and everything, I feel like starts in Virginia. So I don't
Yeah.
know. Well, yeah,
Virginia, I'll tell you what, the reason I hate Virginia is because whenever I would drive through it, it would take for fucking ever. Like that
Virginia
state
is
is
big.
wide.
Hmm.
Ugh, it was always the worst. And then the cops there are always hiding, trying to give you speeding tickets and stuff like that.
But Virginia is for lovers.
Mm, something
I
like
guess
that.
not
Something
that
like
kind of
that.
love. That's funny. Yeah, it's not even a challenge.
No, but Tara, thank you so much for making the time and talking to me about life in general and your experiences.
Yeah, this was fun.
I honestly enjoyed it and I appreciate it.
Of course.
And maybe
Always fun to
sometime in the
chat.
future we'll do it again.
Yeah. You're not a Chinese adoptee, so I don't know if you'll fit the bill for ABC, but
I believe I am not, but maybe I'll ask my parents just to confirm.
just you could double check.
Yeah,
But
excuse me, mom, dad, am I a Chinese adopted baby?
and that would be an interesting conversation,
They're gonna
but
be like, you need to lay off the drugs.
and on that note,
Right. All
yeah,
right. Well, thank you again, and I will talk to you later.
talk to you later.